watch the cartoons conspiracy dark theories. And I know we've heard some of them back in the past, but let's see some of the ones that we missed or didn't get to hear, or some of the newest ones. So let's check it out.
Cartoons, the king of children's entertainment media for almost a century at this point.
Is this
These animated stories allowed for a medium of expression never before seen in the world of TV and film. Exaggerated character designs, anthropomorphic animals, bizarre and stylized worlds, simple lessons and morals, slapstick comedy, they had it all. And over the years, this medium has evolved quite a bit, from short black and white Mickey Mouse animations to the titans of the modern day, like SpongeBob SquarePants and Regular Show. And of course, cartoons aren't just for kids anymore. Some of the most popular series, in fact, are aimed at adult and teenage audiences, like The Simpsons, Family Guy, Rick and Morty, etc. But even the shows targeted at children have seen their fair share of speculations and theories over the years, in regards to what secrets they may be hiding. Deep-cut theories and conspiracies that could ruin your childhood memories of your favorite characters and shows. From purgatories to drug abuse, World War II, apocalypses, and of course, the CIA. And
wait, damn, I didn't know this shit ran this deep. What the fuck kind of rabbit hole?
And who knows, some may have some more truth to them than you might think. So today, we're going to take a look at the cartoon conspiracy theory iceberg.
Wait, if you or someone you know used Roundup weed killer...
The cartoon conspiracy iceberg. Like, what do y'all think some of the conspiracies are gonna be? I got a feeling. I know they're gonna talk about like some
Level 1,
yeah.
Above the surface. Bikini Bottom / Atoll Nuclear Theory. So to start it all off, we've got a SpongeBob theory here. Get used to it, there's a ton on this list, unsurprisingly. And this one is honestly pretty convincing, because the town that SpongeBob and his friends live in, Bikini Bottom, may be named after the Bikini Atoll, which is a coral reef located near the Marshall Islands. Why is this important? Well, this location was actually used for nuclear weapons testing in the 40s and 50s. Maybe this is why there are talking fish and other strange creatures in Bikini Bottom, which could be located just under the atoll. Maybe the sea creatures and other life became mutated thanks to the nuclear testing. Not sure exactly how a sponge becoming sentient fits into that, but I guess that radiation hitting different out here. Ed, and Eddy Purgatory Theory. Definitely the most discussed Ed, and Eddy theory, and one I remember hearing about all the time back in the day with those top 10 theory videos. Obviously, if you've seen the show, you know it stars the Eds, of course, as well as a bunch of other kids that live in a cult.
Yeah, these episodes of Ed and Eddy, like, when you go back and rewatch them as an adult, you realize this shit is actually pretty fucking creepy. Like, with a little element of, like, horror to it. Very well written, though. At times.
Cul-de-sac. However, the world besides them is pretty much oddly empty. Adults or parents are rarely ever seen in the show, so this theory posits that the cul-de-sac is essentially a purgatory, and all the characters are kids who died, with all of them also being from a different time period, going from the early 1900s all the way up to the early 2000s.
Oh, that is
starting with
creepy.
Rolf, who owned a farm with his family in the early 1900s and was killed in a stampede. Johnny died in 1922 after a battle with tuberculosis, apparently, taking his friend Plank, a piece of wood, with him into the afterlife. Then there's Eddy, who moved to the town of Peach Creek with his family during the Great Depression, also trying to scam people and make easy money. And just like the show, all the other kids in the cul-de-sac hated him and eventually got fed up with his scams and chased him out of the town and into a lake where he ended up drowning.
Whoa.
Next are the siblings Ed and Sarah, who both died in a car accident in 1953. Naz is killed by a serial killer for some reason in the 1960s. Double D dies due to an accident with a chemistry experiment in the 70s. Kevin was beaten to death by his abusive parents in the 90s. And lastly, Jimmy died in the early 2000s of some sort of illness. Now, is there any truth to that?
Am I just gullible? Or do I really want to believe this shit? But that shit sounds so believable. Like, I really feel like that shit is like kind of like some good theories, man. Real dead ass. Because one, nobody seems to be dressed the same. Everybody seems to be dressed from different eras. One, the styles and everything too, like not even just like clothing, but like hairstyles, like talking, and then just how each person looks. You get what I'm saying? This actually seems like it rings some truth.
This whatsoever, or is this just a creepypasta at the end of the day? Because these claims don't really have much to back them up, obviously. Although some also point to the fact that the kids have strangely colored tongues, such as blue or green, as a sign of them also being dead as well.
Yeah,
Although this is likely due to just the jawbreaker.
I always wonder about the tongues. I did. I always wonder why the tongues were just fucking green, but I didn't think they were dead. But I just was like, okay, whatever. Art.
Candies, which are very prevalent in the show. Also, there's the fact that the parents are rarely ever seen in the cul-de-sac. I mentioned that in the beginning, because it seems as if the show takes place during an almost endless summer, although that was also later disproven by them going to school later on. And while some of the kids do kind of look like they're from different time periods, there's nothing to actually support that as a fact. I mean, it's kind of an interesting take, but at the end of the day, it's just another edgy theory from back in the day. You know how it goes. Ash is in a coma.
What?
One of, if
No,
not the
don't
most
ruin Pokemon for me. Don't ruin Pokemon. What?
popular Pokemon anime theory that there is, being that the main character Ash Ketchum is actually in a coma the entire time, and everything, the whole series takes place in his imagination. This idea is supported by a couple of things, such as Ash not ever really aging throughout the entire series, as well as the fact that there are similar characters in every
Nah, I know this one was a lie, cause I got all my gym badges when I played Emerald, Sapphire, and Gold. I remember on Game Boy Advance, nigga, I had all the... No, bro. Ash caught... No, this is real. Don't do this to me, bro. Don't do it.
Sound like the Nurse Joys. But the main theory and creepypasta that this originates from suggests that after Ash gets hit by one of Pikachu's attacks in episode 1, he goes into a coma. And everything from this point on is simply a dream, which allowed him to fulfill his fantasies as a great Pokemon trainer. But that's not all. Everything after this point in the anime feels a lot more like a lighthearted kids show, whereas the rest of the first episode felt a bit more grounded and realistic. Well, as much as a show about pocket monsters can be, anyway.
Yeah,
in Ash's dream, it would make sense that he wouldn't want to hurt any people or have any Pokemon be seriously injured or even killed, and that's also why there are so many kids running around with Pokemon as well, despite how dangerous that should actually be in reality. And on paper, this theory does honestly sound kind of convincing as far as these go, but there is actually a lot more to this, such as certain characters and Pokemon representing different aspects of his personality, and his journey in actually growing as a person, despite him not actually physically growing at all. Overall, it's a fun theory and an interesting perspective on such a lighthearted kids show for sure. Ho-Oh, Grant...
I don't know if it's a theory or not, but that reminds me of like Stewie from Family Guy, like how he never ages. I mean, most characters don't never age, but just to watch a baby over 30 years not age at all, not even in the slightest, is just crazy.
To Ash, immortality. This theory here is used to explain the fact that Ash doesn't ever age in the anime series and is seemingly immortal. But why? Well, according to this, the Ho-Oh feathers can grant this everlasting life, which they describe as eternal happiness in some of the Pokédex.
Now that he's saying this does actually kind of make sense. Oh, no, don't ruin my childhood. The reason why I say that, though, is because I do remember watching, like, seasons, as the seasons progressed to Pokemon, the characters did start to age. Like, they started giving, like, wrinkle lines and wrinkle lines and fucking stuff under their eyes and shit like that to show signs of aging. But Ash hasn't really aged at all. That is kind of odd. I don't know.
Entries. And in the early episodes of the anime, Ash actually sees the Pokemon, which can be where he was forever made a 10-year-old, going on Pokemon adventures forever, basically, which honestly sounds a little terrifying, to be honest. More like a purgatory than eternal life. Perhaps, though, his wish of becoming the best Pokemon trainer is only able to be realized with him always remaining young, giving him essentially infinite time to do so. However, there isn't much other solid evidence for this theory. Mrs. Puff is being tortured to teach SpongeBob as community service. Now, I couldn't exactly find this specific theory per se, but there are plenty of similar Mrs. Puff theories, especially the one popularized by YouTuber and...
Hold on, chat. So, do y'all think that Miss Puff was valid, though? Because Miss Puff hated SpongeBob. Or not even hated. It felt like whenever SpongeBob came around, he gave her real bad anxiety. And I feel like it's valid, because whenever the fuck SpongeBob come around, shit get fucked up in the worst way.
SpongeBob theorist Alex Bale, who proposed the theory that Mrs. Puff was hiding a shady past of another failed boating school and perhaps a criminal record under a different name, which actually does have some hints throughout the episodes. However, her being tortured to teach SpongeBob as community service, well, probably not that.
SpongeBob legit drove Mrs. Puff crazy, like. Drew, this lady crazy.
But rather, she does have nightmares about having to teach SpongeBob, which is definitely possible in a few episodes and moments throughout the series, but none are more notable than the episode Doing Time, where Mrs. Puff is trapped in prison, but even still is somehow found and disturbed by SpongeBob, causing her to lose her sanity throughout the episode, and maybe she isn't even in a prison, but rather the prison is her own mind. It's all just an endless nightmare. As the police officer tells her at the end of the episode, why would you go?
The relationship between SpongeBob and Mrs. Puff is the biggest gaslight I've ever seen. It's gaslighting at its finest, bro.
Go to jail. You already did your time. Yet it cuts to her back in the prison despite her in the real world being on the outside, with SpongeBob the one being arrested. It's all very confusing, but a lot of the Mrs. Puff lore is. But honestly though, this is one of the most probable sounding theories out there. SpongeBob main characters are all different drugs. Again, one of the most well-known SpongeBob theories, very similar to the 7 Deadly Sins one, which we'll get to in a minute.
What do y'all think SpongeBob is? Drugs. What is he like? What's a drug that gets you real hype? Is he Molly? Like, what would Patrick be? A downer, right? What would he be like? I don't know. Let's hear what he has to say.
But this here suggests that the 4 main characters of the show all represent a different drug or in fact addicted to said substance. First of all, there's the main man himself, SpongeBob SquarePants, who is apparently represented by shrooms due to his wild mood swings, yet usually happy and almost euphoric demeanor, as well as his intense imagination due to him possibly tripping balls, I guess. Sounds like a bit of a stretch, and honestly, with how hyper SpongeBob is, I expected his to be cocaine for sure. But no, that goes to Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff.
Nah, hey, Mr. Krabs definitely off the cocaine. That nigga definitely off the cocaine.
To both represent it, due to their constant bouts of paranoia. Squidward represents heroin, I guess because he's usually just upset, doesn't really care about life or his job at all, and is prone to lying, although this doesn't really relate to the drug in any way, not necessarily, at least. And lastly, there's Patrick with marijuana, due to him being pretty much always positive.
That's what I'm saying, like, Patrick had to be a weed smoker, because this nigga always down, bro, for real.
Positive, relaxed, and just chilled out, as well as the fact that he eats a lot. Got a little bit of the munchies going on, I guess. But yeah, honestly,
you know who else used to smoke that was cartoon characters, and we all know they were smokers? Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, bro. Them dudes had to be smokers. And the reason why I said that, they just reminded me, because them niggas used to eat sandwiches that were stacked this motherfucking high with a rope around that bitch, and they'll eat it with the rope. Like, oh, you niggas had to been high.
This one is definitely a stretch, and a lot less believable than the 7 Deadly Sins theory, which is very similar to this in nature, but a lot more convincing for sure. Rugrats is a figment of Angelica's imagination. Probably the biggest Rugrats theory, and par for the course when it comes.
Personally, coming up, I was not a Rugrats fan. I remember when everybody was hype about that. I think it was like the Rugrats T-Rex movie or Dinosaur, whatever that shit was. I never could really get into Rugrats. It was always like a downer kind of show. So I was never a fan. I never understood the fandom either.
Comes to the edgy purgatory creepypasta theories of the 2010s, which were abundant to say the least. But anyway, it's kind of your standard affair. The Rugrats are all a part of Angelica's imagination and are actually in fact all dead. Chucky and his mother both passed, Tommy was a stillborn, and the twins, Phil and Lil, were actually just one aborted fetus, but are depicted as twins because Angelica didn't know the gender of the baby. And the actual creepypasta of this theory goes even further into uncharted fanfiction territory, further stating that All Grown Up, the spin-off show of the Rugrats, is also some sort of hallucination in Angelica's mind, with kids now all aged up to meet her age.
I do remember All Grown Up, though. I actually did like All Grown Up. It was a lot better. It felt like, I don't know if y'all remember, I think it was called As Told by Ginger. That's an old one. Whew. That's old, but it gave that same type of vibe, so.
However, as all edgy creepypastas do, somehow it devolves even further into her being high on drugs and even dying of an overdose, which is what causes the end of the show. Level 2, movie set. CN City is canon. So, Cartoon Network City is usually associated with a series of bumpers created for the channel in the early 2000s, from July 2004 to June 2007, with this era being called the CN City era. These bumpers would feature various characters from Cartoon Network living in a city together and interacting with one another. But the theory goes that this city is actually canon, and all the characters shown in the bumpers canonically live there, I guess. This mostly stems from an episode of OKKO titled Crossover Nexus, which features characters from Ben 10, Steven Universe, and Teen Titans Go, as well as a villain called Strike, who is able to teleport these characters into different universes, which has something to do with how these other Cartoon Network characters end up in CN City. SpongeBob main characters represent 7 deadly sins.
Okay, the 7 deadly sins is a little bit more believable than the drugs, but what sin would, like, I can't think of what sin. So, okay, obviously, Mr. Krabs would be greed. Patrick would be what sloth or some shit like that. SpongeBob would represent what? Happiness, I guess. Let's see. And then obviously Plankton would be the evil motherfucker.
Earlier, but yes, another one of the all-time classics, that each of the main 7 characters in SpongeBob represent a different deadly sin. Probably the most obvious one is Mr. Krabs being greed. Probably don't need to go into that one too much. Everyone knows it's basically his entire personality. Then we got Squidward and Wrath. This is because of his propensity to get angry very easily, especially as SpongeBob. Squidward is almost always angry, or at least sad and upset with his life in some way. Patrick is Sloth, another pretty obvious one. For the most part, he doesn't have a job or do anything unless he's hanging out with SpongeBob. I mean, he literally just lives under a rock and is even given an award for doing absolutely nothing in one episode, so there you go. Plankton represents envy, which also makes a lot of sense, given that he's lived in the shadow of Mr. Krabs' success for such a long time, and at seemingly every turn tries to steal the secret Krabby Patty.
Hold on, he had 2 of the shawties. Yeah, boy, that boy had 2 shawties, goddamn. Yeah, the twin cheeseburgers on the date, boy. Let's go. What the fuck was Plankton finna do with those cheeseburgers?
Formula to emulate Mr. Krabs' product and business, although he does end up switching places with him in the episode The Algae's Always Greener, and realizes it isn't all it's cracked up to be. But still, this one definitely makes the most sense for him. For Pride, we have Sandy. I guess mostly because she's smart and somewhat full of herself, but I don't know, this one isn't as strong in my opinion. Then there's Gary and Gluttony, mostly because he is a lot of the time shown eating a lot of food, even running away at one point to look for more. And lastly, we have SpongeBob himself, which again isn't the strongest of cases, but I guess it works with this theory. He represents lust, but not exactly in the typical way it's depicted. Nothing like the Fullmetal Alchemist version or anything. No, SpongeBob's lust likely comes from either his cheery demeanor and outlook on life in general, or more likely from his love of his job and seeming obsession with working as a fry cook at the Krusty Krab, going to great lengths to work there even if he isn't being paid. Overall, this theory fits pretty well, although I definitely don't think any of this was—
I just thought about it. Why the fuck Squidward ain't got no pants on? Where's your pants, bruh?
Was intentional on the part of the show writers.
Wait, everybody got pants on except fucking Squidward. What's up with that? That need to be a theory.
SpongeBob skin theory. Another huge SpongeBob theory, which I definitely can't do justice here in this iceberg, but Doug Woolever did a giant 1-hour deep dive just into this theory, and it's many layers, so check that out if you're interested. But basically, from my understanding, it goes like this. SpongeBob SquarePants, the TV show, has a very strange obsession with characters wearing fake skins and costumes, to the point where there are too many instances to ignore. And maybe, just maybe, something sinister is being hidden just underneath the surface. It's so common, in fact, in the show that the characters themselves don't even react that much to these situations, even referencing things like head enhancement clinics, when SpongeBob rips off a guy's fake head. Who could also forget that crazy gorilla suit episode either? Then there's the whole salmon suit thing. I mean, there's just too much going on here, but—
Chocolate! Chocolate!
What does it all mean? Is it just a running gag, mostly from the earlier seasons, or does it actually mean something? Maybe the show doesn't take place underwater at all, and they are simply just humans wearing fish costumes. Or maybe everyone in Bikini Bottom is just crazy. I mean, stuff almost just as weird happens there all the time that people don't bat an eye at, so who knows? Lincoln Loud was adopted. Here we have a theory about the show The Loud House, which suggests that Lincoln Loud may have been adopted, which would explain his white-colored hair compared to the rest of the family. And the reason for his family adopting him? Well, because they wanted a son and could only ever have daughters. Apparently though, it was later revealed that the white hair actually came from his grandfather, so myth busted, I guess. Pinky is a genius and the brain is insane. Posted on the fan theories subreddit, get ready because we're going to get a lot of these, we have a theory suggesting that Pinky from Pinky and the Brain is actually the genius, while the brain is the insane one, which is the opposite of how it's portrayed. I mean, you don't even have to watch the show to know this, really. I mean, one is named the Brain. In the theme song it says one is a genius and the other is insane, but maybe Pinky is actually the genius, simply watching the brain enact plans that almost always fail, meaning the brain is actually the insane one. Maybe Pinky is even the one sabotaging his plans and acting stupid. And think about it, what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I guess I'll just leave it at that. Aladdin is set in a post-apocalyptic world. Here we go with our first big Disney theory. And trust me, there will be many more just like this one. Now, as most
In a that's a different one. I ain't never heard that one. Okay, let's see.
Most of you know, the 1992 classic is an adaptation of the Aladdin folktale and the book of 1001 Nights. However, this theory suggests that rather than being set in the distant past, it's set in the far future of a post-apocalyptic world, due to a few things that don't match up with the time period, such as some clothing pieces, as well as a line from the genie about being stuck in the lamp for 10,000 years. The genie also makes pop culture references from the modern era, including an impersonation of Jack Nicholson, and the Aladdin game, which some point to as more proof, has a stop sign, curious enough, as well as with some...
Hey, I remember back in the day playing that Aladdin game on PlayStation. That shit used to be fire. Boy, that shit was fire.
think is a nuclear bomb in the sand, suggesting that this could be a post-nuclear world. But it's all very far-fetched, of course. Pop culture references are in every movie nowadays. But as for the game, well, honestly don't know what they were doing with that. Danny Phantom equals Timmy Turner. Now, this is a wild one, but some think that Timmy Turner at some point wished to become a different person and became Danny Phantom. How or why is this the case? Mostly, I guess, because both Fairly OddParents and Danny Phantom were both created by the same guy, Butch Hartman, and these were only further fueled when he made a video on this conspiracy theory, comparing other characters from both series, which could also be the same person. Definitely stoking the flames with these theorists in this video. Scooby-Doo is set in an economic depression. Here we go. So, few people have proposed that the original Scooby-Doo cartoon from the 60s and 70s takes place during an economic depression and collapse. This is because of a few things, mainly the...
Damn, Scooby-Doo came out in the 60s and the 70s? Sheesh! I thought that shit came out later. Okay. And I could see the economic depression, because it seemed like... Yeah, listen.
amount of rundown and abandoned buildings, as well as the amount of villains in the show running some kind of quick money scheme. Also, there's the fact that Shaggy has trouble affording food for him and even for Scooby, but this could also just come down to them being just poor kids. But also there is the fact that the 1970s in the United States went through an economic recession combined with...
Look at my boy Scooby. Scooby was looking high than a motherfucker. He just got done. That's why he's sitting in the back of the van. He just got done smoking, bro. Get the fuck...
by inflation, so this could actually be a concept that's actually baked into the show, given it was happening while the show was actually being produced. Greg is a sociopath. One of the most solid theories here so far, given that almost everything we see in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books can lead us to this conclusion, that the main character, Greg Heffley, is actually a sociopath. How so? Well, for the most part, he's a pretty standard, relatable protagonist. But once you peel back the layers of his actions throughout the books, his intentions seem a bit darker. For one, Greg is known to emotionally manipulate people, including his own friends, especially his best friend Rowley on numerous occasions. And not only that, but he seems to lack empathy for other people. However, the author of the books, Jeff Kinney, said in a Reddit AMA that he was just a messy kid and not actually a sociopath, disproving this theory. However, many people still believe this even after that, given what we've seen of Greg's behavior. He's just too selfish and awful of a person for them to simply discount everything that's happened. but maybe he's not a sociopath. But at the very least, he's not a great person either, at least in the earlier books. I don't really know anything about the more recent ones, but people say he's grown as a character and shows a lot more empathy now, but let me know what you think. Cosmo and Wanda are just Timmy's antidepressants. Yes, so a theory has been proposed that Timmy's fairy godparents may represent Zoloft and Prozac, respectively. This is mainly due to the fact that they appear when Timmy feels he needs them. Maybe this also explains why there are side effects that arise from him abusing the magic, and people have even extended this theory further to the other fairies in the show, saying they could possibly also represent different drugs, such as Jorgen von Strangle possibly representing steroids. Is this a bit of a stretch? Maybe, but welcome to Cartoon Conspiracy Theories.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I really do think they were just his fairies. And everybody knows that fucking Jorgen von, whatever his name was fucking Arnold and Schwarzenegger impression.
Let us have our fun.
Listen, paying $14.
Now, did Arnold Schwarzenegger take steroids? I don't know. Allegedly.
Narrator is Ash's father. Another Pokemon one. So the identity of Ash's father has been a huge mystery in the Pokemon series for forever, basically. All that we know is that he is a Pokemon trainer himself who left Pallet Town as well. At some point it seemed like Giovanni, the leader of Team Rocket, was going to be Ash's dad, at least according to one of the writers of Pokemon Live. But some even think his dad is just the Mr. Mime Pokemon that his mom has, which, yeah. But another theory is that the narrator of the anime is his father, given that they presumably went on similar adventures. Maybe that also explains why Ash remains young, given it is his child and is him recounting stories possibly told to him from Ash's perspective, but there isn't much to really back this up as far as I could tell. Caillou has terminal cancer. A couple of variations on this one, with it either being just...
Alright, that one makes sense. First off, and that's crazy that he says that. Because when I used to watch Caillou, I used to be like, this kid is fucking, what? I'm just a kid who's 4 each day. I'm sorry. I don't know why I remember that. He was bald, and look at the background. Everything was like white. It seems like he's like in purgatory. Like he's already dead or something like that. This white background used to make this show so creepy for me. So I could not watch it, bro. But that actually kind of does make sense.
That the character Caillou has terminal cancer, which is why he's bald, or like many of these theories, he's actually just already dead as a result of said cancer.
I believe
and maybe everything in the show is just flashbacks of his life before he passed. Or maybe the reason his parents are so nice to him and put up with everything he does is because he's eventually going to die.
That little nigga Caillou was bad, bro. But that was my son. I'd be beating that little nigga ass, boy. He'd be belt to ass, boy. I ain't playing with you, boy. That nigga used to be bad as hell, boy. Boy, my mama would never let me get away with the shit that Caillou could get away with, bro.
Which is a very tragic outlook on this children's show. Apparently, though, the reason he is actually bald is because the author wanted to keep the character recognizable as a toddler, because in the books, Caillou starts out as a small infant. The monsters are all in Courage's head. I can't think of a more perfect show for these kinds of conspiracy theories. It's just so weird, creepy, and cryptic.
Oh, I remember this episode too. This was the bubonic plague episode. This episode was one of the Cartoon Network's most creepiest episodes. Oh, that and the barber. Oh, I think his name was like not Psycho. He used to be like naughty. Like Courage the Cowardly Dog used to be so creepy, but I couldn't stop watching. It was so addictive.
It's bound to be looked into more closely than other kids' shows, right? The first one we have here is that all of the monsters encountered throughout the show are just figments of Courage the dog's imagination. Maybe since Courage is actually a dog, the world is warped around his perspective, which...
I could actually see that, because it seems like whenever all this crazy shit is going on, Muriel and Yusuf don't really, like, acknowledge it too much. They kind of just, like, skip over that part. And then when Courage talks to, they never acknowledge that he says anything either, which is even more strange, so...
Which we see...
On top of the fact your dog carrying this fat bitch... Sorry, I don't mean to call her a fat bitch. With this fat lady around and doing all this craziness, like, bruh, what the hell?
everything through, meaning the people and monsters he encounters are a lot more scary because we're seeing them from his point of view, and some are easier to explain from his perspective, such as Freaky Freddy, but what about actual supernatural like entities like King Ramses, the Return the Slab guy? At least this would kind of explain why Eustace and Muriel are never really afraid of the perceived threats that Courage sees, because either they are exaggerated or maybe they don't even exist at all. Level 3, Andy's Room. Magic School Bus Doppelganger Theory. Another Alex Bale theory here, this time not about SpongeBob but the Magic School Bus, a show I'm sure a lot of you guys remember from your childhoods, probably from watching it at school. But basically in the show it seems that everything that happens is actually part of a live-action TV show in universe thanks to a segment where a producer from the show answers questions about it. However, there are subtle hints throughout the episodes, even in the producer segments, that everything that happens is actually real and not—
Hey, I remember watching Magic School Bus back in the day. Miss Frizzle was that bitch, bro. I love her. All positive energy. You was like, man, I wish I had a teacher like that, bro. I actually did have a teacher that kind of reminded me of Miss Frizzle. A little bit.
Not a fake TV show. So in essence, there really is a magic school bus taking kids to dangerous places, and they're pretending like it's all fake. But why though? Well, Alex believes that the kids are just going with what Miss Frizzle says, and if they disobey, well, they actually become the field trip, as was the case with Ralphie and Arnold. And maybe this goes even further with the kids being duplicated into some weird doppelganger clones or something, which is why they sometimes don't remember all the places they've—
What's crazy about the Magic School Bus situation, I actually heard people showing like the, I don't know if y'all remember the show Captain Planet from back in the day. Go look it up if you don't. It's actually pretty entertaining. It aged terribly though. But they were saying that the kids from Magic School Bus ended up becoming the characters from Captain Planet. I don't know. Somebody tell me if that's real or not.
They've been to. Why someone like Arnold is not only fine after taking off his helmet in space, but also, more importantly, how he can appear in the school bus while also inside of himself. Also, maybe some of these clones survive, which would be the two producers who look a lot like the kids Tim and Wanda, and maybe even Miss Frizzle herself is somehow a clone of Arnold. This one goes deep, as all Alex Bale theories do, but it's definitely a fun one. Tom and Jerry is Nazi propaganda. This idea mostly stems from the name of this beloved children's cartoon, Tom and Jerry, Tommy's being a nickname for British soldiers during World War I and World War II, and Jerry's being the nickname of Germans. So maybe Tom represents England while Jerry represents Germany. I mean, the cartoon did start back in 1940, but besides that, there isn't much other evidence for this. Also,
I believe this one a little bit too, because they used to have a lot of like references from like different countries, like Italy and France and French references. And I remember one episode I was watching. I can't remember the gray mouse or the gray mouse that would come sometimes. That was like super brave. He'd be always trying to fight. I remember. I think he got like the guillotine. No, the cat got the guillotine one episode, and I think he's the one that ended up giving it to him or some shit like that. That shit was so crazy.
So it's interesting that Tom is the cat, and therefore the British in this case, where Jerry is the mouse, and usually the one who always wins in the end. This depiction just doesn't really add up with the known historical context. Plus, in the original short, Tom was also known as Jasper, and Jerry was originally known as Jinx. Donald Duck has World War II PTSD. Donald Duck as a character dates back to 1931, so I thought this probably wasn't the case, right? But still, it's an interesting—
I believe this one too, especially. I hated when this nigga used to come on and sing like, nigga, can you get it the fuck out, nigga, or get the fuck off the show?
Take. Mostly I thought this notion came from a 1943 World War II propaganda film called Der Führer's Face, which depicts Donald Duck living in Nazi Germany and working at a factory. However, that isn't actually the full picture. In fact, to my surprise, there's this Donald Duck comic which seemingly proves this theory as real. He literally has flashbacks to fighting the Japanese in World War II. So, case closed, I guess. This theory is proven, at least as far as the comic version of the character goes. Nemo is a figment of Marlin's imagination.
No, not Finding Nemo.
An all-time Pixar animated classic. The film is about Marlin looking for his lost son Nemo. However, this theory states that Nemo doesn't actually exist, and that throughout the whole movie, Marlin is chasing a figment of his imagination. His real son was killed before the events of the film, and he is so haunted by that loss that he seeks out a son that doesn't exist, eventually with it all culminating in him coming to terms with the true loss of his family by the end of the film, represented by Nemo going to school. There isn't too much to back this up though, other than that Nemo apparently means no one in Latin.
Finding Nemo was one of those classics that was an instant classic when you watched it. One of those heavy hitters. I can't tell you how many times we watched Finding Nemo, bro. Oh my god.
But yeah, it doesn't really make sense under any real scrutiny. Arnold gained PTSD about field trips on the Magic School Bus after nearly dying. Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit already, and it kind of ties in with the whole Magic School Bus doppelganger theory, but Arnold clearly is scared of the field trips, which is why he is hesitant to go on them. I mean, who wouldn't be, given how dangerous the circumstances of them are? Like, in reality, who wants to go into space and into a volcano, or even into another person's body as a kid? Like, that's terrifying when you think about it. This would especially be true if he did survive the freezing in space incident. Like, who would want to do anything after something that traumatizing? So yeah, as far as dark kid show theories go, this one definitely works for me. Doofenshmirtz is Phineas and Candace's biological father. What is the proof behind this? Well, Phineas has a triangle-shaped head, and you know who else does? Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz. But you know who doesn't have a triangle head? Ferb, because he's their stepbrother.
And they're both geniuses. That actually does make sense. A little bit. Let's see what he says.
Candace doesn't really either, so there goes that. Maybe it also explains why Phineas is so smart, though. And Phineas and Candace's biological father is never revealed, so could this actually be true? Well, no, because co-creator Dan Povenmire confirmed this wasn't the case in an interview in 2011. SpongeBob death theory. So this is kind of a hilarious explanation.
That's that Doodle Bop episode. Meow, 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 meow.
For the relative decline in quality after Season 4 and the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. In reality, from my understanding, this is due to the original creator, Steven Hillenburg's departure, as well as some of the early writers that made the show and the characters what they were. Since then, SpongeBob didn't really act like himself. He notably became dumber and more naive than he came off in the first 3 seasons, making people think he actually died in the film, and that this new SpongeBob wasn't the one we knew, but rather some kind of clone or something, and a more childish version because this was a newly born or reincarnated SpongeBob. Powerpuff Girls Brenda theory. This theory states that the Powerpuff Girls are actually all just one person, a girl named Brenda, and different sides of her personality. She ended up developing these personalities after being bullied during her...
I thought the Powerpuff Girls was made from sugar and spice and everything nice. Don't ruin this for me, man. It's crazy because Powerpuff Girls was one of those shows that, even though the main cast was like 3 females, you had so many boys that was into Powerpuff Girls, and when they brought the Rowdy Rough Boys, because they brought that more boy element to it, bro, that shit took that show over to another element. But it's crazy how the show was very feminine, like very feminine, but a lot of boys was watching it, and we actually enjoyed that shit, whether people want to admit it or not.
Her childhood, leading her to create Blossom, who represents a smart and mature side she wants to be, Buttercup with her aggressive side and darker thoughts that spawned from her abuse, and finally Bubbles, which showcases her more innocent side. Now, why is her name Brenda? I have no idea. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's even a character in the show with that name.
Who the fuck? Who's that dirty nigga?
And this whole thing is basically just a fan fiction. I mean, it does start with the letter B, so I guess it does follow the same naming trend as the Powerpuff Girls, but that's about it. Jessie's original owner was Andy's mom. In Toy Story 2, Jessie is revealed to have been owned by a girl named Emily in a flashback sequence, and her last name is never specified. Interestingly, Andy's mom's first name is also never revealed, so could they be the same person? I mean, they do look kind of similar, and the timelines for the most part do match up. However, there isn't much else to back this whole thing up, and actually Andy's mom has a slightly different hair color, so this probably isn't true, although it would make for a cool tie-in. Cartoon Network Shared Universe. Ever heard of the Pixar theory? Chances are you probably have. A crazy conspiracy that
Oh, look at that's the Kids Next Door house right here. That used to be my shit. K and D, fire, legendary, one of the best cartoons of all time. Actually, this is crazy. This is like crazy as fuck. I remember they used to show us this the scenes of them walking in this neighborhood right here, or not neighborhood, in this like I guess downtown area. That's crazy if they're all connected though. That's wild.
Somehow every Pixar animated film is linked together in one universe and timeline. Well, that's basically the same situation here, that all Cartoon Network shows share the same universe. This is likely because of a few references to each other hidden in some of the shows,
Yeah, the
as well
crossovers
as because
too,
of the crossover episode of
definitely the
OKKO, which had a ton of different Cartoon Network properties in it. But honestly, that's all there is to it, just fun references.
Wait, was that the Jetsons house over to the right?
Dee and the Test sisters from Johnny Test were swapped at birth. Very interesting coincidence here, that Dee looks very similar to Johnny Test, while the Test sisters look very similar to Dexter. What's going on here? Well, since Dexter does have features from his mom and dad, we can rule out that he was swapped for Johnny at birth. Rather, this theory states that the sisters, for whatever reason, were swapped, although exchanging two twins for one baby seems kind of an odd trade, but they don't just look the same. The Test sisters are just as intelligent and eccentric as Dexter, but the more likely explanation is that this is all just a coincidence, or even better yet, the Test sisters are a direct reference and homage to the original Dexter's Laboratory, which it seems Johnny Test took quite a bit of inspiration from in regards to its premise. Or if you really got your tinfoil hat on, since these are both Cartoon Network shows, you could work this into the Cartoon Network Shared Universe theory. SpongeBob and Sandy doing karate is a metaphor for sex. Okay, so it sounds crazy, but hear me out. SpongeBob has been known to include some more
I would think that SpongeBob would be asexual though. Like he doesn't even seem like a sexual character. Either that or gay. That's just me. Teachers only.
adult themes hidden in their episodes, especially in the early seasons. I mean, remember when SpongeBob and Patrick got married and adopted a sea scallop? Or
Yes.
when SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs killed a health inspector and buried his body, or at least tried to? Or how about even the episode where they're just actually swearing? Point is, despite it being a funny kid show...
Oh, I forgot the swearing episode. I'm sorry. Intrusive thoughts.
There are some darker and more adult undertones in some of the episodes and some of the jokes. And this theory from the Fan Theories subreddit again thinks the episode Karate Choppers is no different, with it secretly being about SpongeBob and Sandy having sex. So much so, in fact, that SpongeBob ends up getting fired from the Krusty Krab. Basically, in the post, it describes how the safety helmet and gloves represent condoms. Stay with me here. And how the surprise karate they do at like every turn is, well, you know. They both can't stop thinking about it and become obsessed to the point of SpongeBob getting fired because he can't get any work done. They also go on a picnic and have to fight back the urge to do karate, and eventually they get hired again by Mr. Krabs to use karate to make Krabby Patties, which, if you follow this theory, sounds quite disgusting. But
yeah, I don't know about this theory. This one doesn't sound plausible at all.
does this have any merit? Absolutely not, but this post is hilarious. There's even more supposed references and nods to sex in the episode, but if I go too deep into it, I'll probably be demonetized, so we're just gonna move on. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy were exposed to Bikini Atoll radiation as Navy divers. Kind of a sub-theory here, I guess, for the original Bikini Atoll one, but mostly concerned with the characters of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, which I never really noticed, but if you think about it, why are they humans? They're pretty much the only ones in Bikini Bottom, right? Like, how can they even breathe down there, and why are they so small compared to the other humans, like the fisherman, the narrator, the diver, and David Hasselhoff? Something fishy is definitely going on here, pun intended. The shrinking could have been caused by the shrink ray, fine, but why can they breathe underwater? Well, maybe they were Navy divers during the Bikini Atoll test, which would explain why they are mutated and how they can now breathe underneath the ocean. And could also possibly explain how they shrunk. It would also even explain their advanced age, given they were divers in the 40s and 50s. Kind of like this theory, honestly, but the other explanation is equally viable. being that they are simply toy action figures of human superheroes given life by the radiation, which would also explain their small size. The Mystery Inc. crew are Vietnam draft dodgers. Another r/fan theories banger here. So according to this, the show takes place in the year 1969, a point in time where many young Americans were being drafted into the Vietnam War. And so it's possible that Fred and Shaggy were trying to dodge the draft, and were on a road trip with other companions on their way to Canada to escape the war. I mean, Shaggy is depicted as the classic hippie character from the era. Scooby-Doo, well, I mean, he's just a dog, I guess, while Fred seems like the opposite of Shaggy, and might have actually been selected to fight, and rather than doing that, chose to flee. Of course, Daphne and Velma wouldn't be drafted, but Velma could have just been an anti-war activist, while Daphne is, I guess, just Fred's girlfriend. And they're all just living out of a van. But if this was the case, I don't think they would be wasting their time chasing criminals and ghosts around, but hey, maybe that's just me. Winnie the Pooh mental disorder personification. Allow me to ruin your childhood if I haven't already.
Please don't ruin it for Winnie the Pooh. Not Winnie the Pooh. No. My girl loved Winnie the Pooh. She would hate it if she was here.
Because this theory states that each of Winnie...
But I will say, like, the Winnie the Pooh characters did seem like the different emotions. Like, obviously, like, Eeyore was, like, depression. It seemed like Winnie was like bipolarism. Tigger was more like ADHD. Tigger was definitely ADHD. And I can't think of the other characters. Well, and then like that little pig-looking character had to be like fear or some shit like that, or anxiety, because that motherfucker was always on edge, bro.
Winnie the Pooh's friends, as well as himself, all represent different mental disorders. Pooh represents OCD because of his impulsive actions and repetitive behaviors, as well as his obsession with honey. Piglet is said to suffer from an anxiety disorder, possibly generalized anxiety disorder due to her nervousness, and Eeyore is probably the most obvious, clearly suffering from depression.
Yeah.
I don't even think I really have to explain that one. These are the main ones, although some have suggested others, like Christopher Robin, the boy, having schizophrenia as he imagines all of these talking animal characters that don't really exist. Flintstones is a post-apocalyptic future of the Jetsons. Here we go again with the future post-apocalypse theories.
That
not
building,
only that, but apparently...
I think that building in the background on the, they were saying like all the universes were connected, that big tall building I was trying to point at before the screen went, I think that was the Jetsons building, bro.
According to this, the Flintstones is a sequel to the Jetsons. Kind of funny when you think about it. I mean, the Jetsons being the futuristic one and being the prequel. But with the 1987 film, The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones, we see that instead of going forward in time, they go back to the Stone Age and meet the Flintstones, basically disregarding this theory. But another interpretation is that the time machine did go into the future, the far future, of a post-apocalyptic event that destroyed the world. Possibly a nuclear war or something like that, that set everything back to the Stone Age. This would explain some of the more complex systems seen in the Flintstones, such as an economy, as well as some technology that shouldn't be around. I mean, they even had Christmas, so take that as you will, I guess. Avatar: The Last Airbender is set in a post-apocalyptic world. Another one.
I agree.
So this is a fan theory from the...
Avatar: The Last Airbender, fire. If you have not watched it, I recommend it 10 out of 10. I do believe that it takes place in a post-apocalyptic era, though. Definitely. I can see that.
Subreddit again, shocker. It suggests that it's again set in the future, and the bending abilities of the elements are actually some kind of genetic nanite technology, and not just some kind of spiritual martial arts thing. I'm not really sure how this would all work.
It's definitely a reach.
Hey, there are dumber theories on this list. Plus, it gives a possible explanation for the strange animals in the series, with them possibly being genetic experiments. Level 4, Bikini Bottom. Lucy carved the Great Pumpkin. In the Peanuts film, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, there is a darker theory for why Linus never gets to meet it on Halloween. The reason is not because it doesn't exist, but rather because Lucy killed it by carving it at the beginning of the film. That random pumpkin she brought home was it. Linus even says, quote, "You didn't tell me you were gonna kill it," which is a weird thing to say about a non-sentient pumpkin. This would explain why they never got to meet it in the end, because tragically Lucy just killed the Great Pumpkin. Why Garfield hates Mondays. The typical theory for this goes that Garfield hates Mondays because it's the beginning of the work week. However, he doesn't have a job, so why? Well, because he's lonely without John. However, the creator, Jim Davis, went on to explain in 2014 that Garfield, quote, doesn't have a job and doesn't go to school and every day is the same. Nevertheless, every Monday is just a reminder that his life is the same old cycling again, and for some reason, even though his life is pretty much the same every day, on Mondays specifically, awful things tend to happen to him physically. So, there you go. Timmy reimagined his deceased godparents into Cosmo and Wanda. So this one possibly originates from some really old meme back in the day, which I found posted on, you guessed it, Reddit 11 years ago, so I'll just read it out here. Quote, did you know? There's a creepy truth to Fairly Odd Parents. The Fairly Odd Parents is about a kid playing pretend with his fish. His godparents died in a car crash when he was younger. Since they were the only adults who ever understood him, he finds comfort in imagining that they are there to watch over him, since his parents obviously don't care. His babysitter slaps him around, but he isn't brave enough to tell on her. The granted wishes are all in his imagination, hence why they never have any lasting consequences. Mr. Crocker has made sexual advances on a young Timmy for years, hence the delusion that he is desperate to steal Timmy's quote-unquote fairies, which represent his innocence, joy, hope, and good wishes for the future. So, yeah.
That's a dark one right there. That is really dark. I don't know if I believe that one, but that's dark as fuck.
Dark theory, but what else is new? Courage puppeteers his dead owners. This is something that actually happens in the episode The Great Fusilli, in which a magician of the same name turns Muriel and Eustace into puppets, and sadly by the end of the episode it ends with...
I remember watching this episode and I was like, so does that mean that dude, so once Courage reversed and turned him into a puppet, does that mean that he's dead now? Because they left out that building and everything and left him there doing that. Oh, this show was so creepy, but good.
With Courage not being able to turn them back, suggesting that possibly after this episode, all of their actions in the series are being done by Courage puppeteering them around, as if they were actually alive, to just keep him company and to cope with the guilt of being unable to turn them back. And as far as Courage theories go, this one is quite tame, and also kind of makes sense. Rosie is the narrator of Caillou. Back on Reddit again, we've got a theory that the character Rosie grew up and actually wrote the Caillou books in universe and is narrating the story. Her hair color would match with the narrator, and she even knows certain details about the characters, including their thoughts, which only she, I guess, could know. This could also tie in with the whole Caillou cancer thing as well, as he likely would be dead when the stories are being recounted, but to be honest, I don't know enough about Caillou to fully explain this one or try to understand its subtleties and possible hints. Cars homunculus theory. This is a good one. So we all know that in the universe of Cars, there are, well, sentient car beings and basically no human life to be found. This is their equivalent in these movies, but how? Are these actual living biological creatures or some kind of advanced technology? There are all the standard elements of human culture found on Earth, such as language and architecture and whatnot. The cars themselves are even built like they are in the real world, with mirrors, windows, and door handles, which wouldn't be necessary if there weren't people driving them, right? Well, that's where this theory comes in. Basically, somehow this ties in with the whole overarching Pixar conspiracy, but humans somehow were merged with cars into some kind of homunculus situation. And there's even some incredibly disturbing artwork which details how this would work. Maybe it was to protect them from some kind of apocalyptic event, or maybe it was some kind of weird experiment. Whatever the case, yeah, it's definitely extremely creepy to think about. Brian Griffin was the result of CIA experimenting. How could the CIA not be involved in at least one of these conspiracies? Come on now. So this is a film theory from the r/Game Theorist subreddit, where the poster describes how Brian is a CIA genetic experiment.
And you know what's crazy about this theory? What if the CIA agent was Stan from American Dad? That'd be crazy as hell. I don't know, that might be something worth looking into. I'm definitely gonna look into that later.
However, in the Family Guy universe, it seems talking animals are pretty normal, so maybe all of these talking anthropomorphic animals are the results of CIA experiments. Also, there's a strange episode where it's revealed that Brian fathered a human son with a human woman, so if you weren't already asking enough questions, there you go, I guess. Or maybe...
Or what if Brian was like a homunculus? Like, you remember in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, that doctor that turned his daughter into a fucking homunculus, or what the fuck ever he turned her into, he spiced her or whatever. What if that was what Brian is?
Maybe talking animals and bestiality is just the norm in Family Guy. Who knows? Frankie Foster / Madam Foster is imaginary. So in Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Frankie Foster is the granddaughter of Madam Foster, who has her own imaginary friends, which is what the whole show is basically about. But this theory takes it further, with it saying that Frankie herself is an imaginary friend of Madam, which is like imaginary friendception or something. Although the creator Craig McCracken has since debunked this theory on Twitter, saying that they are both in fact real people. Slade is Robin from the future.
I do agree with this one. I used to watch, I love Teen Titans. I used to watch a lot of Teen Titans, and I do agree that Slade is Robin. Because I do remember watching an episode of Teen Titans, and I remember Slade taking his helmet off. Or maybe it might have been Robin's imagination, but when he took the helmet off, it was actually Robin.
On the next episode of our
and how the fighting styles are similar and everything, so I definitely can believe this one.
Fresh fan theories. We have one that states that Slade from Teen Titans is actually future Robin, on some Goku Black Goten type stuff. But this theory doesn't really add up, given that Slade is Deathstroke and has a full name, that being Slade Wilson, with a storied history that isn't anything like Robin's backstory. Miss Frizzle is a Time Lord. Back to the Magic School Bus, which usually has theories that make a lot of sense, at least given the context, but I'm not sure with this one. Yes, Miss Frizzle is technically a time traveler, that much is canon and obvious, and maybe might be something even more sinister, but a Time Lord? Like in reference to Doctor Who? Yeah, I'm not really sure how that all works out. Maybe because she has her own TARDIS thing, but this time it's a school bus and not a phone. Level 6. Vacuum of Space. The Smurfs are white supremacists and KKK members.
Whoa!
Not the craziest Smurfs theory on this iceberg, if you can believe it.
Whoa, why they got the... I don't want to put it up, I might get demonetized, but... Why they got I don't want to go too 45 or 90 degree angle, but you know what I'm saying. What the hell?
Comes a bit later, but this is still very wild and more of a joke than an actual theory, I'm pretty sure. But basically because they're all the same color, that being blue, and wear white clothes with their leader wearing red, well, who does that really remind you of? Also, the villain of the series, Gargamel, is, I guess, a Jewish name, so there's that. But the biggest reason behind this is because of rumors that the creator, Peyo, was actually a Nazi and affiliated with the KKK. But I cannot find any solid evidence of this, only this article here discussing this rumor and theory. Dexter's family are artificial creations. This is a pretty dark theory proposed by a now deleted user on the fan theories subreddit, which states that maybe Dexter accidentally killed his whole family in some sort of tragic accident, and to help cope with this, he had to remake them as androids, or possibly even just made straight up clones, which is why Dexter is the only smart one and his parents and sister are quite dim compared to him, because he made them this way in order to stop them from asking questions. But the more likely answer for this is because he's just wiping their memories of all his past experiments, which he's been known to do. Although he was also shown to know how to make clones before, so maybe he did just make clones of his family. I mean, he's clearly smart enough to do so maybe that is what happened. At least that might be my headcanon from now on. Snoopy is a Time Lord from Doctor Who. Again with the Time Lord stuff. I don't know much about Doctor Who, like I said, but from what I gathered, it seems this comes from Snoopy's doghouse being a lot bigger on the inside than it appears, as well as the fact that it can actually fly, and there's also just the fact that Snoopy's been around for a really long time.
Alright guys, we've done a good amount of reacting to this. I'm not going to do the whole 20 minutes. That shit was crazy as fuck. I've seen some creepy ones. They had some of my favorite shows on there that I used to rock with back in the day. That shit was crazy. If y'all want to see more of this type of content, let me know, and I will catch you guys later.